Hi, this is Aaron Marshall with Ratio Christi here at UNC Wilmington. We're in a series of videos where we're looking at arguments for God's existence, and specifically, we've been looking at the Kalam Cosmological argument. The Kalam Cosmological argument says that everything that begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe must have a cause. In a previous video, we looked at the reasons or the evidences, although briefly, that why we should believe premise 1 and premise 2 are true. Therefore, the conclusion necessarily follows from those two premises. The logic is valid. Therefore, the universe needs a cause. Now, we will get lots of objections to this argument. One of the most standard objections you get is that we are committing what's called God of the gaps reasoning. And the objection basically goes like this: things that you can't explain, you're just plugging God in as a placeholder because you can't explain it. The reality is that's exactly the opposite of what we're doing. What we're saying is, here's the evidences. It seems like the universe came into existence. Everything that we know that comes into existence needs a cause, therefore the universe needs a cause. The question then obviously becomes, what kind of cause is it? And in the next video we'll kind of look at that a little bit. But this is not God of the gaps reasoning. This is what we call inference to the best explanation. Here's the evidences, and it's pointing us back to the fact that there seems to have to be a cause that brought everything into existence. So again, this is not God of the gaps reasoning. We would say this is actually good reasoning, or inference to the best explanation. If you say, I'm certain there's no God that could exist or be a part of this, it seems like you're doing atheism of the gaps, because you're saying, I'm certain God doesn't exist regardless of where the evidence points. We're just looking at where the evidence points and reasoning to that and coming to conclusions and say, here's the evidence. It's pointing us right to God's existence. Now, some people will say, some objections will say that the Kalam is committing what's called the composition fallacy. And the fallacy that says what is true of parts of a thing are not true of the whole. So for example, if each brick in a wall weighs 5 pounds, the whole wall doesn't also weigh 5 pounds. That would be the composition fallacy. And what they'll say is, just because everything in the universe that begins to exist needs a cause, it doesn't mean that the whole thing, the whole universe, actually needs a cause. The problem with that view, I think, is that not everything that, when we're reasoning from part to whole, is the composition fallacy. And I can explain that to you by saying this. If every brick in a wall is red, then to say that the whole wall is red is not the composition fallacy, it's just true. So the question for you, listener, viewer, is this: does the argument that everything that begins to exist needs a cause, therefore the universe began to exist, therefore it needs a cause, does that seem more like every brick is 5 pounds, therefore the wall is 5 pounds, or every brick is red, therefore the wall is red? I would submit to you that it's the latter. That's what makes the most sense. And so we're not doing anything illogical when we say everything that begins to exist needs a cause. The universe came into existence, therefore the universe needs a cause. Now some people say, well, what about the multiverse? That will explain things. I don't think that explains anything, because all the multiverse does is just back you up one step further and say, what caused the multiverse? See, eventually you're going to get to the point where you have to say, there's something exists. And the question is, why does anything exist at all? And basically, here are your two alternatives. Either nothing caused everything to come into existence, or something caused everything to come into existence. Which one makes more sense? If you're an atheist, the question for you is this: why is there anything at all? We believe it's because God exists and He caused everything to come into existence. The question for you is, how do you account for the things that exist right now? There has to be a cause. There has to be something that brought everything into existence, and we argue that that cause is God. In the next video, I'm going to show how the Kalam gets us certain attributes of this cause, what this cause would be, because maybe you call this cause Phil or Jane or whatever, we call them God, but there's certain attributes that seem to follow from the Kalam cosmological argument for this cause that brought the universe into existence. So remember, at UNC, Ratio Christi at UNC Wilmington, we're always asking good questions, but we're also seeking good answers. And I think if you seek good answers on this issue, you will come to the conclusion that God exists. This is Aaron Marshall, live with Ratio Christi here at UNC Wilmington.